Previously on the Summoner's Beasts. One of the 7 treacherous Archon demons, Fantarel, had disguised herself for months in the dragon and fantastical monster-filled dimension of beast summoner Tayrun. As the overseer of this world, he is meant to protect it, so when he learned of her presence, he was eager to get her out. She'd been living in a village called Sethiel, cloaked as a human sorceress by the name of Talai. When Tayrun found her, she revealed her desire to take control as the overseer of this world from him for herself, and challenged Tayrun to a battle, in which they'd pick 5 of the greatest monsters they can each summon to face off against one another. Like, a really big Pokemon battle. The winner would take control of the dimension. Later though, another Archon, Sciferimov, decided to invade Tayrun's world herself, with the techno-organic demon virus she has used to overthrow and destroy many other worlds. Torreli, despite seemingly being an enemy, called on Tayrun and his friends, all of whom have been actively working on tracking and defeating the various Archons, asking to help defeat Sciferimov. Their battle with her ended with Sciferimov near defeat, but then she threatened to flee and tell the other Archons of Torreli working with their enemies. To stop and assuage her sister, Torreli then took one of Tayrun's friends, Astra, hostage, stating that Astra was the daughter of a woman who'd betrayed the Archons many millennia ago, Tarsa. The Archons had a standing agreement that whoever found out what had become of Tarsa would get to invade a dimension they all had their eyes on, M308, and Sciferimov in particular had desperately wanted to attack this world herself. Talai had learned that Tarsa had been stripped of all her powers and was being held captive by Astra in a pocket dimension attached to the universe Astra was the overseer of. Talai offered to take Sciferimov there and give her Tarsa on the condition that she not tell the other Archons of Talai working with Tayrun and his allies. Sciferimov agreed and went through a portal with Talai and Astra as a hostage, but Tayrun was able to leap through at the last minute, unsure if Talai had allowed him to do this and was actually double-crossing her Archon sister. Now, it's time to find out.
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
I rolled across the stone ground as the portal closed behind me. I sprang quickly to my feet, hoping for any chance I'd moved quietly enough that I'd not been noticed. That hope was quickly squashed. Sciferimov immediately whipped around and snatched me by the neck in one of her mechanical tentacles, raising me into the air. I reached to use my Overseer runes, but she snatched each of my arms in 2 of her other claws, pulling them away from each other.
A poor decision, Overseer. The Reaper and your little pets aren't here to save you now.
Her 4th tentacle shifted into a rapidly spinning round blade, and she inched it towards my forehead. Astra was still bound in grass and vines, hovering next to Talai, and could do nothing to help. I really needed to be right about Torreli's deception. "Don't harm him, Sciferimov! I need him alive," Talai stuttered. Sciferimov whipped her head angrily towards her.
Oh, really? And why ever would that be, sister?
Talai hesitated a moment, then finally said, "I'm going to take his Overseer abilities for myself." I was surprised she'd willingly admitted that. Sci slammed me into a stone wall of the crimson cavernous tunnel we were all in.
You're just full of treachery today, aren't you? You're planning to lock all us other Archons out of that world so you can just have it for yourself, is that it? Why else would you need the Overseer's powers,
She took a sharp inhale, then said, "So what if I am? It just means I'll be staying out of your way. You can have all the other fantastical realms in the multiverse for yourself. So keep quiet about this too, or you don't get Tarsa, and no M308 for you." I sensed the slightest bit of fear in her tone, and if I detected it, Sciferimov certainly did as well. I looked over at Astra, whose face was mostly uncovered from her bonds. I noticed that she was ever so slightly shifting. Her arms seemed like they were behind her, beneath all the tangled greenery, and she was moving them around. I caught the faint glow of her Overseer runes moving as well, but what was she doing? Finally, after staring down her sister, Sciferimov said,
Fine, but know that you're dead either way. Even if you do take this Overseer's abilities and lock us all out of his world, that won't keep the Reaper away. And even if she doesn't get you, Eldrorok will eventually find a way in. And you know he won't make your death slow. You'll be wishing the Reaper had got to you first.
Talai just nodded slightly. "So, put him down then." Sciferimov yanked me off the wall, spun me around in front of her, and released my neck, but kept me held by my arms in the air.
No, I won't hurt him, but he's sticking with me as a little insurance policy to make sure you don't try anything stupid.
She pushed both my wrists together so that she could hold me up by one tentacle. Torelli then turned to Astra. "Alright now, tell us which way to Tarsa." Astra smirked. "You know, I usually don't let someone tell me what to do or tie me up like this until at least the third date." The bonds tightened around her and she winced. "No games, Astra. Point us to Tarsa or the vines keep squeezing till your pretty face goes purple." "Ugh, you promise?" They tightened more and Astra said, Alright, fine. This tunnel behind me." Immediately, the vines loosened. It infuriated me seeing her hurt Astra, but something still felt to be in my favor. I noticed that the vines around Astra's lower back, where it seemed her arms were fidgeting, hadn't tightened. If Astra was doing something with her Overseer runes that could help us, maybe Torelli was in on it too. She had just saved my life, but that could have been solely because she did genuinely need me alive for her plan to go forth. If I died with the Overseer energy of my world within me, it would vanish and she would never have it. I did now feel that I truly wanted to trust her, but couldn't commit to it yet. We walked in silence for only a few minutes, or more accurately, the Archons walked and Astra and I were carried. The tunnels of this cavernous realm were all shades of red and orange, and after a moment of walking, we were guided by a stream of surprisingly cool magma flowing slowly along a small trench on either side of us. Eventually, we emerged into a large cavernous room. Magma from the various other tunnels met and circled the space, in the center of which was a broken down stone throne. There were some out-of-place looking modern amenities, likely from a more technologically evolved world than my own, such as a desk, a thin mattress mounted on a stone slab, a weathered chair, and a fair number of torn, burnt, and tattered books. From the covers that were still legible, they seemed to be like some I'd seen in my ally Sterling's office, ones on personal development and becoming a more compassionate human being. Clearly, from their state, the prisoner was not interested in them. Speaking of whom, in front of the stone throne, doing push-ups with sweat pouring off her forehead, was a woman I'd never seen but had heard many awful things about. Tarsa. Her eyes darted towards us very briefly, but she did not stop her exercise. Well, it's about time you brought me some interesting visitors, daughter. If I have to see that grinning Boy Scout or the self-righteous Reaper one more time, I may have to drown myself in magma. Sciferimov and even Torelli both looked astonished, an expression I was not used to seeing on beings as powerful as themselves. Sciferimov spun me behind her, still holding me up, but walking farther from me towards Tarsa.
You really managed to live all these years. Incredible. And so unfortunate for you that you lasted long enough for us to take physical form and come find you.
Tarsa finally stopped mid-push-up and completely turned her head with an intrigued grin. So, it is you then. She stood up slowly. Even if she didn't currently have any abilities, she was still quite intimidating in demeanor and stature. She almost seemed happy to see the Archons, which just made me all the more unnerved. Sciferimov looked her up and down and said,
Looking a bit frail compared to your old self. The years haven't been so kind, have they?
If this was considered frail, I imagined she must have looked like Heath in the past. Tarsa held her ground confidently as the Archon approached. It is not the years that have been unkind, it is my insolent daughter. I gave her your orb and a whole world to oversee, and she repaid me with imprisonment and stripping me of all my power. So have all the fun you want torturing a powerless opponent. Though the less cowardly play would be to return some power to me, so we can have a proper battle, Green Archon. Sciferimov's claw slammed into Tarsa's neck and smashed her into the stone chair, then pulled her forward again. She grabbed her arms in the same way she'd initially taken mine, pulling them in opposite directions. Her only extra limb not binding Tarsa was the one still holding me in the air. Meanwhile, as intriguing as the scene before me was, I was also actively trying not to draw attention to the slow movement I was seeing from Astra and Torelli next to me. Sciferimov was clearly pulling Tarsa's limbs away from each other more and more, but her victim seemed unfazed.
You think you can goad me into granting you more power after all we gave you? Funny how you feel so betrayed by your daughter when you did so much worse to us. We created the multiversal orb for you, gave you the greatest power in the multiverse, and all you had to do was make physical forms for us. Instead, we had to wait thousands of years for that bratty little Arava girl to do it for us. I'm going to so enjoy tearing you apart, and then I'm finally going to return to M308 and take control of the world you could have ruled with us, if you'd given it to us oh so long ago.
Tarsa sneered. Oh, Green Archon, that sounds like a lovely little plan you have. Unfortunately, it seems you have not learned to be more careful who you trust. Sciferimov paused a moment, then whipped her head back towards Torelli and Astra, which finally gave me permission to do the same. Torelli had moved directly behind Astra. The vines were barely binding her now, and she was just finishing a set of intricate movements on her Overseer runes. The greenery all dropped away, and she turned and pressed her palm into Torelli's forehead. Suddenly, there was a pulse of wind from them both, and Astra's Overseer runes moved off of her and on to Torelli's head, then sliding down her body onto her own arm. She immediately started spinning and pressing the runes. Wow, this is surprisingly intuitive, isn't it? Sciferimov yelled out.
What is this? What are you doing?
Oh, just getting us all ready for a little cage match, sister. I hate Tarsa about as much as you do, but this was never really about being here for her. A frightened look suddenly struck Sciferimov's face as an excited one came across mine. Sciferimov dropped me and spun one of her claws in a circle in front of her, starting the creation of a round green portal. It sparked into existence quickly, but just before she could step through, Torelli finished her rune activation, and Sciferimov's portal vanished. She spun her tentacle again and again, but it was no use. Her escape portal was not appearing. I leapt closer to Torelli and Astra, who was now free and stretching out her arms proudly. How long did you two have this planned? What exactly was the plan? I asked eagerly. Astra rolled her neck. Oh, I wouldn't exactly call it a plan per se, just a vague idea we'd talked about when we were getting friendly back at the Sharp Tank. I have a hard time trying not to impress a pretty face, so I may have let slip that I had Tarsa locked up here, and that if we lured Sciferimov in here and I gave Torelli my Overseer runes temporarily, she could lock her in. Now the only person that can get in or out of here is our lovely leader, the Reaper. Torelli turned to me. So Tayrun, how about you give Alexis a call and get her in here to help us finish off Sciferimov? Get her permanently off both of our backs. I smiled widely at her. Absolutely, but why did you leave me able to come here too? What benefit was I in this plan? Astra could just as easily call Alexis in. She rocked her head back and forth a moment, then said, Well, I just didn't want you thinking I'd betrayed you. I figured you'd be smart enough to put the pieces together. Plus, you being here kept Sciferimov distracted from what Astra was doing under all those vines. And of course you can help us in this fight now. Might take all of us to defeat Sci. She's not exactly one of my weaker siblings. My heart rose as all of my trust in Torelli was suddenly feeling so validated. I still didn't fully understand why she seemed more inclined to help us than the other Archons, but I didn't have time to find out, as we were far from out of trouble yet. A mildly impressive misdirection, daughter, but what pleases me more so is that you brought me not one, but two of the Archons. Very convenient. We all suddenly noticed that Sciferimov had stopped trying to open a portal, and now seemed to be choking and shaking. She dropped to one knee and, still held in the air by three tentacles behind her, was Tarsa, taking in a slow, deep breath as waves of green energy were spilling onto her body from Sciferimov's tentacles. Sciferimov tried to release Tarsa and pull her tentacles away, but Tarsa snatched two in her hands and held them tight. I turned to Astra. What's happening? I thought you stripped Tarsa of all her powers before you locked her in here. Astra's lip was trembling. I did. There's no way she has any powers. I must have checked and confirmed 50 times. There's no way I'd have ever risked her getting out of here again. Tarsa marched closer to Sciferimov, still holding the tentacles, and kicked her to the ground, then stomped on her back. The green energy then started swelling up through her leg as well. Oh, you did, daughter. But, you see, I have been alive long enough to know to always have backup plans in place. She knelt down and held her head closer to Sciferimov's, who was wheezing. Did you really think I'd possess the multiversal orb for thousands of years, the only item that can grant you all your physical forms, and not consider that someone else may acquire it at some point and grant you those forms themselves? In case that did transpire, I built into it a little curse of my own, just for you Archons. We didn't understand what was happening yet, but Astra's shock wore off enough for her to transform in a burst of steam to her green dragon form, and she lunged forward towards Tarsa, to get her away from whatever she was doing to the withering Archon. To all our shock, though, a black tentacle then sprung out of Tarsa's back, latched onto Astra by her scaly neck, and hurled her into one of the nearby tunnels with little effort. I made sure that if ever someone used the orb to grant you all physical forms, those forms would be like power batteries for me. I'd then be able to absorb all of your ever so impressive abilities for myself. You won't even have access to them when I banish you back to the non-physical realm. They'll be all mine. I even gave my daughter the orb, thinking you may contact her from the non-physical realm and have her make you these forms. Much as her treachery did hurt me, it was also not unexpected. Though apparently the blocks I put in place so you Archons could not track my movements or contact me again extended to my daughter as well. And so I've simply been here waiting for the day you gain physical forms and come looking for me, so I could finally do this. Tarsa then ripped Sciferimov's tentacles off. With one last furious and terrified glance, the pinned Archon Demon burst into smoky ash and green energy that swirled all around Tarsa and merged with her body. She became like a blend of her prior self and Sciferimov, with two tentacles emerging from her own back. Before I could even process what was happening, one of the limbs sprung forward to me and bound my wrists once more. I was yanked into the air over to Tarsa as Astra was lumbering back into the room. My heart was thudding like never before. Had we really just handed the powers of an Archon Demon to the most treacherous woman in the multiverse? Tarsa's other tentacle suddenly shifted into the same spinning blade Sciferimov's had once been, and she held it close to my shoulder. I could feel it slicing away chunks of the fur lacing my upper armor. Now, Blue Archon there, you and my daughter seem to be friends with this boy, so here is a deal I offer you. I am going to count to 5. With each number I count, I will sever one of his arms and legs. If I get to 5 and you have not released the locks on this dimension, allowing me to leave, then his head will be struck from him as well. Immediately, I yelled, Do not do it, Torelli. This may be our only chance to keep her trapped. Astra had shifted back to her human form and was yelling through her multiversal wristwatch. Alexis, get here now, now! Tarsa slowly said, 1. I felt the spinning blade pierce into the flesh of my arm, and I couldn't hold back a terrible shriek of pain. I wanted to stop myself to not trigger a response from Torelli, but I couldn't help it. The pain was brutal. Okay, stop it, please, stop! The blade pulled back just out of my arm, but I could still feel the wind and my own blood on it spraying my skin. All of a sudden, I was regretting the fact that Torelli actually seemed to care about my well-being. Torelli, really, you can't let her out. Suddenly, in a swirl of purple smoke, Alexis appeared in the cavern before us, her Reaper ring spinning around her head. Despite her usual stoic demeanor, Alexis's jaw dropped and her hands started to tremble when the scene before her set in. Tarsa? What? How? Before she even finished asking anything, she created a Reaper sword in her hand, but Tarsa instantly moved the spinning blade to my neck. Reaper. Presumably you are friends with this one as well, and I doubt you are yet so quick as the first Reaper I faced. Do you think you can reach me before I rid him of his head? Alexis didn't move forward, still shaking and clearly thinking as fast as she could for a solution. I was about to restate that they should ignore my fate and attack Tarsa, but then Torreli finished her rune activation and held her hands up. "There! The locks are gone! Now release him!" Tarsa's blade retracted and she spun that claw in a circle behind her, instantly opening a round green portal. She grinned. "He will be returned shortly, unless you attempt to follow me. I'll seek you out for your abilities at a later date, Blue Archon, when the Reaper is not so readily available. Feel free to inform the others that they'll be mine soon as well." Tarsa stepped backwards through the portal, pulling me through as well. Then it closed. We were in a grassy field at night, but she then made another portal and moved us into another dimension, presumably in case they'd been able to track which dimension she'd escaped into first. She tossed me to the ground in what looked as though it were once a city, like the one I'd recently visited with Astra and Benny to find my beast summon Panchakuta, but this one was now little more than rubble. It seems the Archons have already had their way with this world. Pity, it was one I'd always been interested in having control over myself. My shoulder was throbbing from where the blade had entered, but I could still move my arm well enough. She hadn't reached bone or torn through much muscle. I ripped a piece of my pant leg off and wrapped it around the gaping wound to slow the bleeding. "You, boy, please tell me that besides being an overseer, you have some sort of impressive ability. I'd like to test out these new gifts and see just what they can do." "I will in no way aid you in testing your stolen powers. Instead, I think I'll just call Alexis, tell her where we are, and even if you kill me, at least the Reaper can come finish you off." She shook her head with a smirk. "Quite confident in her abilities, are you? And oh so brave of you, but how about this then? As I am aware from tales my daughter has begrudgingly told me, you and your little friends still operate out of what was once the Agency of Supernatural Protection in Dimension A016. None of those allies are nearly as powerful as the Reaper, and she herself only gained those abilities recently, correct? So how about I transport myself there and slaughter as many of your little friends as possible before you can alert the Reaper to where I am? How many do you think I could get through before she makes even a scratch on my flesh? 5? 7? 10? I paused, wanting to believe that Alexis could get to her instantly and finish her off. But even still, Alexis hadn't been able to face Sciferimov on her own, and for all I knew, Tarsa may be even more adept with these powers that she'd just gained. The Archons had only been in physical forms for a few months, while Tarsa had possessed the multiversal orb in physical form for thousands of years. Plus, she'd clearly had this planned for a while. I didn't want to risk any of my friends being harmed, but was still hesitating. Until finally she said, "Perhaps I'll even start my slaughter with your little lover." My head instantly swung up and my teeth clenched into a snarl, picturing Tarsa going anywhere near Kayla. Though I quickly realized that was a revealing response. "Ah, so you do have a special someone. As if I'd have actually known that, but thank you for making it evident. How is this? You give me a suitable challenge to test my new abilities, and not only will I not dedicate my time to learning who this person is and coming to your world to rid them of their limbs, but I will even permit you afterwards to return to your allies and world, somewhat unharmed, or in the least still alive, if barely." I wanted to protest. I wanted to run her through with a blade, but I knew neither would help. "I am a beast summoner. I call upon creature summons to fight with me and for me." She grinned in a way that made my skin crawl. "Excellent! Then I shall do the same." She spun one of her tentacles in a circle again, making a much larger portal than before. It opened into a very dark realm. Through the gateway came a roar that sounded as though it were from a creature choking on viscous fluid. Stomping through the portal came a dripping slime beast with a large toothed maw, dragging its body along on 2 burly arms. Tarsa looked at one of her claws, and its end formed into a writhing piece of black and green machinery that almost looked like a biomech, similar to the ally my love Kayla is bonded to. She hurled it onto the head of the creature, and the machinery instantly started to grow and spread, overtaking it in the same way Sciferimov had taken control of Gojiralith. Soon, the beast's roars of protest faded into a rumbling deep purr as it stared over Tarsa towards me. She turned, raising herself up on two mechanical tentacles. "My beast is present, so bring forth one of your own. Quickly, before I decide to visit your friends out of boredom." As reluctantly as I could while still abiding, I started slowly turning my Overseer runes. I despised doing what she wanted, but in the least, I may be able to defeat Tarsa's monster and give her a sign that she wasn't nearly as powerful as she clearly wanted to believe. Even as I was finishing my summoner cast, I hadn't yet decided which creature to call. But whoever it was, I needed them to be ready for what was likely a very dangerous fight.
Whoo! Tarsa's loose, everybody, and she's gonna be causing some problems, both for the Sharp Gang and for the Archons. We're coming down to, I think, just 2 episodes left in this series, but even after it's done, there's gonna be a lot of stuff set up for, what's happening going forward in Multiverse Tales. Anyway, if you want a more thorough description of what happened between Tarsa and the Archons way back when, and you haven't been watching Mytholethal, you might want to go back and watch that whole series, or just specifically, I think it's episode 7 where I explain what happened between Tarsa and the Archons, and get excited for Starseed Psyche, which is going to be starting up soon now that Vigilance is over. And another episode of Mytholethal will be coming out a week from today, after part 2 of the community redraw, which I did part 1 just before this video. But anyway, besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote from a man named Mike Dooley, and I may have used this one before, but it probably would have been a long time ago. And that's that taking action breeds clarity. And the way I processed that today in rereading it is, if you have a ton of different project ideas that you think you want to try, and you're being indecisive about which one to jump to first, just pick one and start taking action towards it. It is entirely possible that you get partway through it and realize, this isn't my thing, this isn't the project I want to put my time into. But at least you've gotten clarity on the fact that that one isn't the thing, and you know not to go in that direction anymore. Then you pick another one, take action on it, and maybe it ends up being the project that you want to put your time and attention into. But regardless of whether you find out you were right about that project or wrong about it, you have still gotten more clarity about which direction you should be going, which is far more useful than just sitting back and being indecisive. I hope that's inspiring, I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. Goodbye.